Why Russia will never stop. Machiavelli explains. Imagine you are a prince, not a kind one, not a popular one, but a surviving one. You rule a vast territory. Your neighbors fear you. Your own people sometimes hate you. And yet, you last. Decade after decade, war after war, sanction after sanction. You last. How? 500 years ago, a Florentine diplomat named Niccolò Machiavelli wrote a short book. It was not meant for the public. It was a private memo to a ruler, a how-to guide for holding power in a world that wanted to take it from you. That book was called The Prince. And if you want to understand why Russia has not stopped, will not stop, and, according to Machiavelli's logic, cannot stop in Ukraine, that book is where we begin. Before we talk about Vladimir Putin, we need to understand Niccolò Machiavelli. He was born in Florence in 1469, a city-state constantly surrounded by rivals, betrayals, and shifting alliances. He served as a diplomat for 14 years. He watched rulers rise and collapse. He sat in rooms where decisions were made not out of morality, but out of cold calculation. Then, in 1513, he was thrown out of office, arrested, tortured, and exiled to his farm. With nothing left to lose, he wrote The Prince. The book shocked people then. It still shocks people now. Because Machiavelli didn't write about how rulers should behave. He wrote about how they actually behave, and what separates the ones who survive from the ones who don't. His central insight? Power is not held through goodness. It is held through fear, necessity, and the management of perception. He wrote, and I am paraphrasing here, that a prince who relies only on fortune is lost the moment fortune turns against him. A prince who builds his power on force and strategy, that prince endures. Keep that in mind. We will return to it. Machiavelli's most famous question: is it better to be feared or loved? His answer? Both, if possible. But if you must choose, fear. Why? Because love, he argues, is held together by obligation. And when it is convenient to break that obligation, men will break it. Fear, on the other hand, is held together by the dread of punishment, and that rarely fails. Now look at Russia's relationship with its neighbors, the Baltic states, Georgia, Moldova, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and yes, Ukraine. For decades, these nations existed in Russia's orbit not because they loved Moscow, but because they feared it. The memory of Soviet tanks, the dependence on Russian energy, the presence of Russian minorities that could be used as political leverage at any time. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia lost that fear architecture overnight. Suddenly, Ukraine was looking west. Suddenly, Georgia wanted NATO. Suddenly, the buffer states that Machiavelli would call essential to any prince's security were slipping away. From the Kremlin's point of view, from a Machiavellian point of view, this was not just a geopolitical setback. It was an existential crisis. Because in Machiavellian logic, a prince who cannot inspire fear cannot hold power. And a prince who cannot hold power does not remain a prince for long. Machiavelli also wrote extensively about what he called mixed territories, lands that border your own, that are neither fully yours nor fully your enemies. He was blunt about it. You cannot leave them neutral. A neutral neighbor, he said, is a future enemy, because the moment someone else controls that land, they are at your border. Ukraine is, in this framing, the ultimate mixed territory.
It is the largest country in Europe by land area, excluding Russia. It shares over 2,000 kilometers of border with Russia. It contains the Crimean Peninsula, which houses Russia's Black Sea Fleet, its only warm water naval base. It sits between Moscow and the Western military alliance that Russia views as its primary long-term threat. When Ukraine began moving toward the European Union and then NATO, Russia did not see this as a Ukrainian choice. Russia saw this as a buffer zone being absorbed by a rival prince. Machiavelli writes that a wise prince must secure his frontiers before his enemies reach them. Waiting, he warns, is not patience. It is surrender in slow motion. From this view, the 2014 annexation of Crimea and the beginning of the Donbass conflict were not aggression. They were, in Kremlin logic, preemption. And 2022 was the full expression of that logic. Here is where many Western analysts misread Russia. They assume the war is about land, about resources, about economics. Machiavelli would say, it is about none of those things primarily. It is about reputation. He writes, above all things, a prince must endeavor in every action to radiate greatness, courage, gravity, and strength. And when he is seen to be someone who cannot be trifled with, no one will dare. Russia's reputation as an undefeatable regional power is the foundation of everything. Its influence over Belarus,
its leverage over Central Asia, its deterrence of NATO expansion, its domestic legitimacy. If Russia retreats from Ukraine, not a negotiated settlement, but a visible retreat, that reputation collapses. Think about what follows. Every former Soviet state recalculates. Every border dispute is reopened. Every oligarch who has survived by betting on Kremlin permanence begins to look for an exit. Machiavelli calls this the spiral of weakness. Once a prince is perceived as defeatable, he becomes defeatable. Perception precedes reality. This is why Western observers who say simply give Putin an off-ramp are, however well-intentioned, misreading the situation. The off-ramp must preserve the reputation. A retreat that looks like a retreat is not an option. Not because Putin is irrational, but because, in Machiavellian terms, it would be the most rational act of self-destruction imaginable. Machiavelli divides the forces that shape a prince's fate into two categories: fortune, the things outside your control, and virtue, a word that does not translate perfectly, but means something like purposeful, decisive force of will. He says fortune is like a river. In calm weather, you cannot tell how destructive it can be, but when it floods, it demolishes everything in its path. The wise prince, he says, prepares his dikes and his levees before the flood, so that when fortune turns against him, he has something to resist with. Russia has been preparing its dikes for decades. It built energy dependency across Europe, not as commerce, but as leverage. It cultivated political relationships inside Western democracies. It developed its own payment systems, began stockpiling foreign currency reserves, diversified its trade toward China and India. When sanctions came in 2022, the Western assumption was that the economy would collapse, that the Russian people would revolt, that fortune would turn and the war would end. It did not happen. because the dikes held. This does not mean Russia is winning. It means Russia prepared for the flood. And a prince who has prepared for the flood does not stop mid-river because the water is cold. This is the part of Machiavelli that is most uncomfortable, and it is the part most directly relevant to what is happening in Ukrainian cities right now. Machiavelli writes, "Cruelty used well," and note that word, well, is cruelty that is applied all at once, at the beginning, so that it does not have to be repeated. A prince who is merciful at the start invites resistance. A prince who is decisive at the start, however brutal, establishes order more quickly and suffers less in the long run. He is not celebrating cruelty. He is describing its strategic logic, and that logic helps explain the targeting of civilian infrastructure in Ukraine, the attacks on power grids before winter, the destruction of cities like Mariupol. This is not chaos. This is not losing control. This is, in the coldest, most Machiavellian reading, a message. A message to Ukrainians, to Europe, and to Russia's own population. This is what resistance costs. This is what happens to mixed territories that choose the wrong prince. Whether it will work is a different question. Historically, this strategy often fails. Populations that are bombed into submission frequently become more, not less, determined to resist. Machiavelli himself acknowledged that. He warned princes, "You can seize territory. You cannot easily seize the will of a people." Ukraine, so far, has demonstrated exactly that. Let us now bring this together. Russia will not stop, not because Putin is mad, not because Russians are uniquely aggressive, and not because the West failed to be tough enough early on. Russia will not stop because, within the internal logic that governs how this regime understands power, stopping is more dangerous than continuing. Principle 1. Fear must be maintained. A Russia that backs down from Ukraine loses its fear architecture across the entire post-Soviet space. Principle 2. Buffer zones must be secured. Ukraine, as a Western-aligned state, is, in Kremlin logic, a dagger pointed at Moscow. That perception does not change with ceasefires. Principle 3. Reputation cannot be sacrificed. Visible defeat is regime ending, not because of external pressure, but because of internal political dynamics. The oligarchs, the military, the FSB, all of them are calculating. A weakened Putin is a Putin they can replace. Principle 4. The dikes are in place. Russia prepared for economic warfare. It is not thriving, but it is not collapsing. The calculus that sanctions alone would end the war was always optimistic. Principle 5. In Machiavellian strategy, once you have crossed the river, you do not wade back. The costs of the war, lives, treasure, international standing, can only be justified by victory. Any outcome short of that is, domestically, a catastrophe.
This does not mean Russia will win. It means Russia cannot negotiate from a position of weakness without that weakness destroying the regime. And regimes, Machiavelli tells us, do not negotiate their own destruction. Machiavelli was not a moralist, but he was not amoral either. He understood that history remembers the outcomes, not the intentions. And if he were advising Ukraine, he would say this: "You are not fighting a battle. You are fighting a reputation war. Every city you hold is not just territory. It is evidence that Russia can be resisted. Every soldier who fights is not just defending a border. They are dismantling the myth of Russian inevitability." He would also say, "Do not wait for your allies to act out of love. They will act when their interests align with yours. Build those interests deliberately. Make your survival inseparable from theirs." And he would say, perhaps most importantly, "Fortune favors the prepared." Ukraine has surprised the world not because it was lucky, but because it spent years building the institutions, the military capacity, and the national identity that make resistance possible. Machiavelli called that virtù, the disciplined, purposeful will to shape your own fate. Ukraine has demonstrated it in extraordinary measure. 500 years separate Machiavelli's Florence from today's Kiev. The weapons are different. The borders are different. The world watching is different. But the logic of power, the cold, relentless calculus of how rulers hold on and how they fall, that has not changed. Russia is not acting irrationally. It is acting according to a logic that Machiavelli would have recognized immediately. And that logic, absent a fundamental change in the cost-benefit calculation facing the Kremlin, does not produce stopping. Understanding this is not defeatism, it is clarity. Because you cannot solve a problem you have misdiagnosed. And the first step in understanding what it will take to end this war is understanding why, for Russia, the war has not yet reached the point where ending it makes more sense than continuing. Machiavelli wrote, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. But perhaps the better test, in the end, is this: does the ruler understand the world as it is, or only as he wishes it to be?" That question applies to every party in this conflict, including those watching from a distance.